What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Slate, the Thursday sports edition. We've got a lot to cover. NBA, we'll do a little NFL, and of course, Arnold Palmer. No, not the man nor the drink, the classic, the golf tournament. Reed T. Fowler will join us in a little while. I'm Adam Kaufman. Matt Meiselman is here. This has become something of a Thursday routine for us. We break down the NBA slate and then move to all that other stuff in the back half of the show. Matt, whether it's obviously DFS tonight, and there are all sorts of contests available for tonight's 7-game slate, or of course the DraftKings Sportsbook, we've got some interesting games and some very interesting news to watch over the next, hour and a half or so until lock.
Yeah, and this is a little bit of the opposite of what we dealt with on Tuesday, where we had a bunch of players who we didn't know the status of, but most of them were just fantasy relevant. They weren't really sportsbook or team winning and losing relevant. And that is not the case tonight. We have Kevin Durant returning for the Nets. We have a questionable Jimmy Butler, who I think is much closer to doubtful. We can get into that game. And then we have Trae Young, who we don't know if he's playing or not either. And then we have just a ton of line movement in games where there isn't any news. The Mavericks went from underdogs to favorites. The Celtics went from underdogs to favorites. So I know we focused on DFS on Tuesday. To me, there's just so much more with the sportsbook tonight. But within an hour, I think DFS will sort itself out. I imagine we're going to have a lot of value plays on this fantasy slate. Tyler Hero and Gabe Vincent already look good with Kyle Lowry not playing. You take Jimmy Butler out of there and then potentially Max Strus and Caleb Martin too. Like, this could be a really short-handed Heat team in a pretty good matchup against the Nets. So a lot of moving pieces everywhere. And I guess we can kind of go into all of these games because to me, there's something interesting to talk about with each of them.
Well, there's no question. I'm just looking at it in terms of DFS value tonight, and there are a lot of guys. There's Al Horford with Jaylen Brown out for Boston. Clint Capella is obviously a guy who could become that much more popular if, as you pointed out, Trae Young doesn't play. Malik Monk, Gabe Vincent, Jeremy Lamb, Precious Achiuwa. There are a lot of these guys that could be really good, potentially chalky plays tonight. But as you alluded to, obviously on the DraftKings Sportsbook, with so much line movement, just what we've seen over the course of the day already, we were talking about it a little bit off air. What do you think has motivated some of this, short of obviously just the typical and where the money's going?
I think there's 3 games tonight where honestly, when I looked at them last night, I thought that the sports books forgot which team was home. Like, that was the explanation I had for the Celtics line, for the Mavericks line, and also for the Hawks line. That one was a little more complicated because John Collins was uncertain at that time. He's not going to play. And then Trae Young being questionable, game time decision. So I'll leave that one aside for now, but I had no idea how the Celtics could possibly be underdogs at home against the Grizzlies, even without Jaylen Brown. I mean, the Celtics at full strength to me are in contention for best team in the NBA. And I know Boston people get scared every time I say this because it makes them nervous. They want the team to do well, but I really do feel that way. If you just look at this roster, the top 7 or 8 players on the team, I think it stacks up well with just about anyone. And the Grizzlies, I think, have overachieved more than just about any team in the league, at least any team in the Western Conference. So to me, Memphis is a borderline top 5 team in the NBA, probably closer to top 10. And the Celtics are a top 3, if not in contention for best team with Brown. But Brown doesn't matter nearly as much right now because Derek White's on the team. Marcus Smart is healthy. Peyton Pritchard is playing better. So I just don't think it's really that big of a deal that Brown's not playing. And if he was playing, I think the Celtics probably are like 6 or 7 point favorites in this game. So the fact that they were underdogs by any margin without him, like that just was nuts. And I think that's why the lines moved. It just was a bad line. And now, honestly, I still would bet the Celtics at -2.5. Not quite as exciting. I think it deserves to be 4 or 5 points, but this line needed to move just because it was so wrong. And then I think similarly true for Dallas, kind of just to a lesser extent, where like I think the Mavericks are a better team than the Warriors, provided that Draymond Green isn't playing, which he still isn't. So it's kind of like a mini version of the way the Celtics line has moved. But Dallas also opened as home underdogs and now is favored. And I think, again, it was just a mispriced line where maybe the sportsbook thought that the Warriors were playing in Golden State, but yeah, this has been strange. Like, we haven't seen multiple games with this degree of line movement without any news to justify it. I can't really remember another example of that this season. Just one last point on this line movement stuff. Mm-hmm. The Nets are now favored after opening as underdogs, but that one makes more sense because Lowry's ruled out and Jimmy Butler is now questionable, and I don't think he's going to play. So to me, that one is more explainable. The other games, though, it was just very weird to see where those lines opened.
We'll hit on a few of these, but let's go back to that Boston-Memphis game, because I think it's one of the games of the night in terms of just, even removing like narratives, Jimmy Butler being questionable, Kevin Durant obviously returning from his absence, and maybe the Nets can actually win a game, which is something they have not been doing a whole lot of. But just in terms of two of the hottest teams in the NBA clashing at the Garden, yes, the Celtics are a little bit more undermanned without having Jaylen Brown, a guy who gives you 20 plus points a game. I happen to think that's a little more concerning than you do in listening to you, but you still have Celtics have won 12 of their last 14. The Grizzlies have won 11 of their last 14. So again, these two teams are hot. Ja Morant's gone for 40 plus his 3 of his last 4. He's averaging 40 points over his last 4 games. And one thing that I love going down this road, Matt, is just, I like to take the little stroll down narrative street. And Jason Tatum, man, you don't have Jaylen Brown. The game's at the Garden. Caesar coming off a loss. You have Ja Morant on the other side, who people are putting in the MVP conversation. No, by the way, Jason Tatum, it's his birthday. To me, you put all that together with the potential again of usage rate without a Jaylen Brown. To me, I'm not going to say it's a lock that he goes for 50 points tonight, but I expect him to explode. And I'm not surprised at all to see that he is, with regard to DFS ownership, the most popular projected rostered player right now, going for 50 plus in the fantasy point category. And I think he's going to go well over that, because I wouldn't be, again, at all surprised if he goes for 50 real points.
No, I get what you're saying. And yeah, I mean, I know it's his birthday. I wasn't giving that too much weight. It can matter. I'm not going to say it usually matters, but it definitely can matter. There are certain players in certain situations where they may feel like, because of whether it's their birthday or whether it's trying to show they're a true MVP contender, for whatever reason, some guys just take it more on their shoulders to produce on certain nights. And this is a national TV game. So maybe all of that adds up to make Tatum more viable. I do think he'll be the most popular pay-up option, but to me, there's no way he winds up being the most popular overall player, because once we get Jimmy Butler ruled out, which I do think is inevitable, Tyler Hero for his price at 6,300, I think is just, you almost have to play him. And then Gabe Vincent to a lesser extent at 4,500. And then maybe even Bam Adebayo could be a better play than Jason Tatum. So if Butler winds up playing, it'll change a lot of what I think about the DFS slate. But I get what you're saying about Tatum. Like, I would be scared to fade him in DFS.
Yeah.
But I think the Celtics are balanced enough. They don't need him to be great to win. And this could also, this is, even without Brown, the Celtics are going to be a lot worse on defense without Brown, but they're still going to be great on defense. Like, they're going from the best by far to, I don't know, still the best, but just by a lower margin on defense without Jaylen Brown. Like, this is a really tough matchup for the Grizzlies. I'm not convinced this is going to be that high scoring of a game. So this could just be, we saw what the Celtics did to the Hawks in the second half in their last game, and the Hawks are a really good offensive team. And that was without Jaylen Brown too in the second half. Like, this team can shut anyone down. So if the Celtics end up winning this one like 105-95 or something, I don't think that'd be a crazy outcome.
I know this is me, like, it sounded like I'm kind of, well, I was just going to say, it sounds like maybe I'm buying all the way in, but I'm looking at some of the props on the DraftKings Sportsbook, player props, and, Tatum 35 plus points plus 200. Fine. That I like that. Tatum 35 plus points, 10 plus rebounds, plus 550. Give me the Tatum plus, 35 plus points, 10 plus rebounds, 6 plus assists, plus 1,200 tonight. And I think that's very reasonable.
Yeah, I think these are the ways to attack this too, because when you have a potential narrative situation, I think what you're really getting is more variance, because Tatum could shoot more and just be less effective. But if he does shoot more and happens to have a hot shooting night, or he just has the ball in his hands more and gets more assists and more points, you could get a really big ceiling game out of him. So yeah, I think like the upside is there in taking some of these alternate lines. There's merit to that. I don't think I would bet like Tatum's regular points prop, because I don't know if this stuff is going to matter. But on the off chance we do see Tatum have some extra motivation for the reasons we've talked about, like, yeah, the major upside game definitely is in play.
You mentioned it, the Nets and Heat game, obviously, with, looking at some of the injuries. You've got Kevin Durant coming back. It's obviously a very big deal. Andre Drummond's a game time decision. There's still no Kyrie Irving, Ben Simmons, no Joe Harris. On the other side, like you talked about, Jimmy Butler is a question mark, same as Max Strus, PJ Tucker, Kyle Lowry, Victor Oladipo. They're not playing. Markieff Morris has been out for quite some time, obviously dealing with that neck injury. So it's, it's a virtual pick 'em, Nets at home, 1.5-point favorites. What's the outlook? I mean, what are we thinking for Brooklyn in terms of kind of getting off the schneid, because they've lost 7 of 10, largely undermanned, and what kind of impact is Kevin Durant going to have coming back when he's not surrounded by a whole lot, other than, all due respect to like Seth Curry and guys like that?
He is surrounded by 3-point shooters, so it's going to be a little harder to double team him than I think it was in the past. It was basically just Patty Mills. Now it's Mills and Curry. I think it helps him a little bit. But the thing that's working in the Nets' favor to the largest degree is just how shorthanded the Heat may end up being for this game. They played last night in Milwaukee, had a really tough loss on a buzzer beater by Drew Holiday, and then they're now flying from Milwaukee to Brooklyn. Lowry is still out, so he was the one player who potentially would have been rested. They don't have him for this game. Guys like Adebayo, Duncan Robinson, Hero, they're all second night of a back-to-back, and I just don't think it makes sense for Butler to play. Like, Miami doesn't have a ton to play for right now, except the 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, which I think they may just get anyway. Like, they don't need to try to win every single game. So to me, what we're seeing here with the Nets already favored is an assumption that Butler's out. And I think if you look at the player props too, that'll be pretty apparent, where like Gabe Vincent, for example, has an over-under on points. If you scroll, I forget exactly what it is, but he's probably listed there somewhere. Yeah, right. 12.5 juiced up -130 to the over. Like, that line doesn't exist unless there's a real chance Butler's not playing. Adebayo, same thing. Like, he doesn't normally score 20 real points, and his assist prop, I think, is a little inflated too. Like, it's all basically assuming Butler's not going to be out there. So I actually think if Butler does surprise me, and probably the odds makers too, as it looks, betting the under on someone like Adebayo or Vincent or Duncan Robinson, I think that's where the value will be, because I actually do think it's already just about fully priced in that Butler won't be playing.
So we've got about a half hour left in this show, and I know you won't be here with us for all of it, but before the show, when we were talking, you demanded a solid 45 minutes to talk about Trae Young and his questionable tag and the impact that we're going to see tonight from that. So please, I mean, get off and running here. What should we be on the lookout for here?
Okay, thank you for reminding me that Trae Young is the most important player for sports betting in the history of sports, is questionable for tonight. And I say that in jest a little bit, but I honestly think he has the most potential to impact a game. And I've said something like this in the past a few times, but he has the most potential to impact a game, just the way it's played, of any player I've ever seen in any. I mean, maybe like an ace pitcher in baseball has a little more impact, but Trae Young is so good at offense and so bad at defense that his impact on over-unders is just as dramatic. I think it's impossible for the sports books to properly account for the impact he has, just the combined effect on both ends of the court in terms of how many more points are scored when he plays and how many less points are scored when he doesn't play. So this total is sitting at 231 right now. I think it probably goes to about 236, something like that, if he's in, and it may go to 226, somewhere in that range, if he's out. And I think both of those numbers are under corrections. The Hawks just played the Bulls last week in Chicago. The total for that game was in the low 240s. And previously, they played each other in a game where Trae Young wasn't available, and the opening line for that game was 212. Like, if you just take those, seeing 231, it's in the middle of the potential scenarios. And I think Trae Young, potentially, his impact could be 15 points difference in how many total points are scored in the game. There isn't another player like that. In part because DeLon Wright is a really good defensive point guard as a backup and doesn't play at nearly the pace or any of the offensive proficiency that Trae Young has. So, to give another example, when Damian Lillard doesn't play, Anthony Simons just kind of does some of the things Lillard does. So the drop off in scoring is not so extreme. When Trae doesn't play, you just get the game slowing way down. You get better defense. And I don't actually, just to end on this, I don't actually think the Hawks are hurt as a team by that much when Trae doesn't play. I think the game pace and total are hurt. So the Hawks are 1.5-point underdogs right now. I think that they still probably win even if Trae doesn't play. I just don't think, well, one, I think the Bulls are really overrated. 2, I think the Hawks are really underrated. And 3, I just don't think Trae Young is nearly as important to the spread as he is to the total. So that's the that's the end of the monologue. I won't go 45 minutes. I think just a couple of minutes was enough there.
Trae Young, Lou Williams, they are game time decisions. No John Collins, no Okongwu as well for Atlanta. For Chicago, it's still, there's no Lonzo, there's no Caruso, and there's no Patrick Williams either, just in terms of the injuries for that one. In terms of over-unders, though, and you know, like I said, we've got you for a few more minutes, so we want to hit on this stuff and totals as well. You know, most of these games, with the exception of Detroit and Toronto, are projected to be close. You know, pretty much everything is within 3 points, with the exception of Sacramento and San Antonio as well. That game in particular here, 242 is the over-under. So when it comes to, I don't know if you want to categorize it this way, chasing points in DFS tonight, is that the game that you're looking to target? Is there any game that you want to stack, or are you just paying up for a couple of guys that you like and then sprinkling in, you know, value all over the place?
Yeah, I think it might be, well, it depends the way the news breaks, but to me, like, I think there's sneaky upside in Miami and Brooklyn, because we may have PJ Tucker is the other player I forgot to mention. If you take out Butler, Tucker, Caleb Martin, potentially, Miami's defense is missing, and Kyle Lowry too. Like, they're missing a lot of their good defensive players. And Tyler Hero is not a good defender. He's good at offense. So like, that game, I think, could kind of explode in terms of pace. Obviously, the Kings and Spurs are going to score a lot of points. I mean, the Spurs games, especially since they traded Derek White, have gotten really up-tempo. Defense has gotten worse. So that game's intriguing for sure. But the Nets side, maybe with a surprisingly good matchup, the Heat are on the second leg of a back-to-back and maybe missing a bunch of their best defensive players. I think the Nets potentially have a better matchup than people are going to realize. But just quickly on that Kings game, I do think the 6.5 points there for Sacramento is too many. They had a tough loss in New Orleans last night. They're a little desperate still. I think they're fighting for playoff positioning. I don't think they've given up on the season yet. And I just don't think the Spurs are good without Derek White. So I'm taking the points with the Kings. And then the other news, we almost forgot this one. Fred VanVleet's questionable again.
Right.
Well, he was listed available to play and then downgraded again. He went upgraded, downgraded. I don't know what's going on with him. But I do think laying 9 points with Toronto, if VanVleet's in, that's another spot I'm looking at. So yeah, we have just still so much to wait for, even more than I initially thought we were going to be waiting for.
Yeah, and for that game for the Raptors, there's no OG Anunoby. Obviously, Thaddeus Young is one of those game time decisions as well. But Fred VanVleet, and you know, to your credit, when we were talking about it, I think it was on Tuesday, and discussing, you know, all right, so VanVleet just got ruled out, not tonight, but then, you know, what's the impact for guys like Pascal Siakam? And you had said, yeah, I don't think there's going to be a real big difference. And from a fantasy perspective, he tanked that night. You know, he had like 32 points or something like that.
Yeah.
So, you know, we'll see obviously what that situation looks like, whether VanVleet is good go or whether he isn't.
Yeah, I think he fouled out of that game too. I think I actually had Siakam might have been in the best lineup that I had. So maybe I should have listened to myself and not played him. Yeah, it seems like, one, it's already priced in a bit that VanVleet's hurt because he's missed some games already, but also the minutes just don't go up because the Raptors play their starters the entire game anyway. So yeah, Siakam just doesn't benefit as much as maybe I would have even thought 2 weeks ago. It just, over recent games, it hasn't seemed to matter. Before we wrap up the basketball portion, should we talk about the LA teams? Like, is that interesting anymore? Or are the Lakers bad enough that it's not even worth mentioning them?
Do celebrities go to the games anymore? I think that's the question.
I don't know.
Really.
They maybe don't. I don't know. They might have better things to do. It is Lakers Clippers maybe still has some intrigue. And I think this is the second national TV game tonight after the Celtics game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is going to potentially turn into a disaster for the Lakers in terms of their playoff chances. Mm-hmm. As of yesterday, the Lakers were plus 200 to miss the play-in game outright, just entirely, and not even make it to the play-in. This is a scenario that I think even me, who has been as pessimistic about the Lakers as any person could possibly be this season, even I didn't think there was much of a chance the Lakers would miss the play-in. And they've lost so many games to competing teams that they're fighting for positioning with for the playoffs that they actually have a shot to miss the play-in entirely. Starting with this Clippers game, and then they play the Warriors next. But the following game after that is in San Antonio, and the Spurs are probably their major competitor for that 10 seed. So like this, if the Lakers lose the next 3 games in a row, the season is going to be pretty close to over for them. Like we may be looking at the Spurs passing them by a week and a half from now, which I did not think was possible. But this game
I've been
tonight,
screaming all season since they acquired Russ. I've been saying they're going to miss.
Oh, of course. But did you think they would miss the play-in? I
Miss-
know playoffs, right?
That to me, look, I know it's not the same, so it's
Yeah.
not fair to say like to me it's all the same, but ultimately it is if they get into the play-in tournament and don't make the playoffs. You know, at that point in
Yeah.
time, it is the same. But obviously, I mean, yeah, if they finish as an 11 seed or worse, that's pretty incredible. I'm with you on that.
Yeah, this is not. It would have been hard. Like I don't even think there was a betting line for that outcome until I don't know a week ago. Like I don't think that.
Yeah,
it wasn't even likely enough to entice anyone to look at until I think maybe post Davis injury, and now this has become a realistic possibility.
Yeah, it's bad. It's a bad situation. Our guy Sherrod, the Wolfman, he's ready, tank for draft picks. Yep. Matt, appreciate you hopping in with us, my friend. And you can continue to scour all things DraftKings Sportsbook until lineups lock about an hour and a half from now. And then obviously on through the night with games as they come over the course of that 7-game slate. Should be a fun time.
Yep. Thanks for having me on for this basketball talk, and good luck with the rest of the show and the golf and the rest of the sports. I'm going to go stare at Trae Young news to figure out how massive of an impact this is actually going to be once we find out if he's in or not.
Yeah, whether Trae Young plays, doesn't play, I just hope that whatever the outcome is one that Matt's happy with. So we'll let Matt go. We'll bring in our guy, Reed T. Fowler, as we continue on with this Thursday sports edition of the Slate. And of course, Reed, my man, we're going to get to a little bit of NFL news from Combine Week out in Indianapolis, but especially because you're here and because it's ongoing and relevant, not unlike basketball coming up tonight. We got PGA talk, my man. We got Arnold Palmer, the Invitational going on. And I think, let's see, I'm scrolling through it. For the most part, everybody's in the clubhouse at this point. There's still some scragglers out there on the course, but Rory McIlroy with a 2-shot lead as things stand right now. What have you thought so far around one?
Yeah, I mean, well, you don't want to ask me about my thoughts in the LA teams. LeBron saying that it's not over until he's 12 feet under. I mean, come on. Like Lakers are pretty much done. They're chirping back to the fans, cough.
Oh, it's ugly.
It's first sign of it. So when the Celtics chirp back at the fans last year, the years prior.
That's when you know it's going south.
That's when you know it's going south. But look, right now there's a couple guys out there, a lot of guys that I wrote up early, right? This is always the fear is that your guy's doing well early. You're like, you're pumping up, you're really excited. As I'm watching one of my guys, Ian Poulter, miss his putt on 17, but he's doing pretty well. Rory, Rory's played so well here. And it was just it's a matter of time where we're all trying to find the next Rory. And we forget about the actual Rory McIlroy when he goes
still golfing
7 under par, and he looked fantastic. I mean, it looked like Rory of old, vintage McIlroy. His long irons were fantastic. The wedges were great, which is what has been his Achilles heel over the past couple of years. And he's been driving it. I mean, he's such a good driver of the ball that when you take a look at this course, if you drive it well, you don't necessarily have to, but if you do on this course, it does help you out quite a bit. An interesting part, as you can probably tell on Twitter with John Rahm, is he had a 10-inch putt and he missed it because he tapped it. He had like a little brain fart where he didn't actually try and putt it. He just kind of hit it.
Yeah. And
it was one of the weirdest things I think that I've ever seen from the number one golfer in the world. But everything is copacetic. Everything, like all the guys right now that we thought, like the Will Zalatoris of the world, Billy Horschel's playing well, Sanjay's playing well. It all seems like it's going to quote unquote plan.
Must have thought he was out on the mini golf course. Like,
that's
all right,
weird, man.
Don't hit the clown's mouth. The windmill's going to be coming around. It was odd. It was definitely odd. People were having some fun at his expense, but I guess probably not laughing at himself quite yet, but maybe eventually, because like you said, he is still, at least for now, the number one golfer in the world. But beyond Rory, you've got another 9-10 guys that are within 3 shots of the lead still. So it's again, it's day one, so you expect the crowd to be very or field to be very crowded as obviously it stands right now. Is there someone who's in striking distance, again, very early, but someone in striking distance that you really like?
Well, Rahm. I mean, Rahm's what he's 1 under par. I mean, he was half the odds of what he is now, I think, to win the golf tournament. And he's number 1 in approach and number 120th, which is dead last in putting. That's usually not going to be the case with a guy like John Rahm, and he goes out early tomorrow. So if he can get in and stay at 1 under, he's got to get up and down on the last hole, and it's a pretty testy one right now. And look, even if he shoots even par, even if he bogeys this one and he's 7 back, we've seen Rahm play and go low. So, it'll be a tough test. And if you take a look at golfers, historically at this tournament, guys who have eventually won, right? Bryson after round 1 was 1 back. Tyrrell Hatton, who won in 2020, was 3 back. Francesco Molinari was 4 back. Rory was 5 back when he won. So if you can get within that range of like 4 to 5 strokes, you can probably still be in contention. And again, Rahm is a little bit outside of that, but he's the number 1 golfer in the world. So you have to weigh out those pros and cons. But if you're within 4 or 5 strokes, you're still within the golf tournament. And that's what you need to take a look at. Sam Burns is at 1 or 1 under par. He has to get up and down from the bunker. Doesn't look like he's going to do that, but like that's what you want to take a look at. And so guys like Adam Scott, Scotty Scheffler is right there as well. Bo Hostler is playing well. Max Homa is playing really well. Someone to potentially take a look at for next week's Players Championship. But there's a lot of golf. There's a lot of golf left. And if we have any indication of Florida golf from last week, which is anything can happen, especially down the stretch, then you got to be patient.
Well, and if you're looking at guys, within 5 strokes, that's a laundry list. It's the top 40 right now, obviously.
Right.
So see what the weekend has in store. So as you sit here again, round 1 just about over at the Arnold Palmer Invitational, and you're looking ahead to round 2, to the weekend from a betting perspective, as you sit on the DraftKings Sportsbook, what are the types of things that you're watching for?
Yeah, I mean that's the one thing that you also got to take a look at is who's hitting the ball well and just missing putts. Right. Like that's what you want to take a look at, because like these greens are difficult, right? These Bermuda greens are not as fast. Billy Horschel mentioned it in his post-round presser, is that they seem faster than they are, but they potentially will get faster as the days, as the rounds progress. So when you take a look at that, who's done well on fast greens, who does well in Florida putting, right? And that's what you want to take a look at. And the guys that are up there right now in putting, like, JJ Spawn gained 3.7 strokes putting, but he only gained just under a stroke ball striking. He lost strokes off the tee. That might switch. Horschel lost. I think he gained 2.3 on approach. He gained 3.6 putting. So like, obviously you want guys who are putting well, and can have those pop weeks. And that's guys like Will Zalatoris, guys like Gary Woodland, guys like Billy Horschel. That's what you want to take a look at. Look, it's golf, right? We can know John Rahm can be 120th in putting and still be number 1 in the world. You can have an off day, but usually the cream of the crop, the average odds of the winners pre-tournament is 40 plus 4,000. And usually they're in the top 50 in overall world golf rankings. So usually the cream of the crop win here. And that's a good indication of what's going to happen at the Players and at the major tournaments. These Florida courses, especially Bay Hill, are good indications of that. So I'm sticking with the guys that are in the top 50 in the world golf ranking. I don't think it's going to be like a Sepp Straka type win where you saw someone from way back in terms of the world golf ranking win this golf tournament.
If you're thinking DFS and want to enter a weekend contest, obviously it's not like you're in a rush to make those lineups. You can't yet even, but if you're thinking ahead to, what types of guys based on what they do in the first 2 rounds that you'd be targeting, is there something that, whether it's specific to this course, to this tournament, to this field, or just in general lineup building strategy when jumping in halfway through a tournament, what do you look for?
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about showdown, you want to get, like, if there's a specific tee draw, as John Rahm misses his last putt, so he's going to drop to even par, odds are going to be better, he's going to be 7 back, so some of those trends might not fit that, but again, it's John Rahm. When it's showdown, you want to take a look at the tee draws, right? If, like, in terms of where they're teeing off, whether it's on 1, whether it's on 18, or excuse me, on 10, because they tee off on both 10 and 1 when they initially start. And if there is an easier draw than the first, because birdie streaks, right, are something that you want to take a look at as well. So right now it looks like the back 9, and they're going to play 18, right? Every golfer plays both 9s. So it's not like if they start on 10, they have an easier shot, but it looks like right now that the back 9 initially is playing easier than the front. That's usually not the case, especially because they want to set up the back 9 to be difficult and to have some theatrics towards the end of the round, end of the tournament. But it looks like right now that guys who are starting on 10 are having a little bit better of a round. Rory started on 10 and look what he did, right? So that's what I'm potentially taking a look at right now early on. We'll see if there is, as the numbers come in, if there is any draw difference in the guys that went out in the morning, that went out in the afternoon, and then also on 10 and 1. But that's what I'm probably taking a look at, is guys that potentially are teeing off on 10, who also didn't gain a ton of strokes putting, but did on ball striking.
We've got you for about 10 more minutes, and that's all we have on the show as well. So if anyone, we see you guys in the chat, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, wherever you're finding us, you have any thoughts, questions, whatever it may be, going back to NBA, golf, like we were just talking about, or this read, NFL. It's Combine Week in Indianapolis. I think there are a lot of interesting storylines that are sort of independent of the Combine, because the Combine, again, is just, let's talk to draft prospects and see some workouts and that type of thing. Watch, guys run around in their underwear and make the best time that they possibly can. That to me is not all that fascinating, but some of the bigger stuff that's on the table right now, really, and let me know if you disagree, but to me, it seems to mostly surround the quarterbacks. Is Tom Brady going to unretire? Is Aaron Rodgers going to go somewhere else? The Packers afraid of annoying him, as Matt LaFleur said. Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, guys like that, scrubbing their profiles of their teams. Like, is this, we spent so much time last offseason talking about how many QBs are going to move, what's the big stuff. And we did see some move, but no huge names. Is this the offseason that some big names move?
Probably not, as it stands right now, right? Which, if it's like anything last year, Kyle, for any indication that, because we don't think it is, it will be. So, like, I think the biggest splashes would be Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers changing scenery, and like, this seems to be the MO of athletes now in contract negotiations. Scrub everything on your social media accounts. Show no love. Right, for your franchise that either drafted you, that been in there for 15, 20 years. Yeah. Do it, because that's gonna really signify to the team that you don't want to be there. I think it's all posturing. But I think what you're gonna see too is that people are going. It's a copycat league, right, Koff? Mm-hmm. So people are gonna look at who's the next Matt Stafford. While there potentially may not be a next Matt Stafford, is there someone like a Matt Ryan who's gonna move? Right? Could Matt Ryan move? Could Baker Mayfield? I'm not saying he is Matt Stafford, but could some of these maybe secondary quarterbacks in our minds right now, secondary in terms of what their value is currently, can they move, and will they, improve a team? And I think if you take a look at Matt Ryan, for instance, Denver and Cleveland seem like the places that he could go, that those teams could now make a jump. If he goes to Denver, you already got a good defense and some solid playmakers on offense. If he goes to Cleveland, it's the same thing, right? And they're not trading in division. The Falcons aren't. So that's going to be interesting. Maybe not the blockbuster deal. Like Ryan Tannehill. I mentioned on the Sweat this morning that Ryan Tannehill is maybe an outside chance of moving because, you take a look at to the Washington Commanders. They might not want to spend all this money to get a quarterback and also maybe risk a high draft pick to get a quarterback that they don't necessarily think is franchise. But could someone like Ryan Tannehill be that guy? They all the reports have come out that said that they did their whole due diligence this year because last year they missed out on Matt Stafford. Right? Like,
just looking at it now, the Commanders, which is still, it's going to take a little time to get used to saying that. The Commanders are the favorite to land Russell Wilson, at least as far as non-Seattle teams go.
Right. And so they have the cap space. I think they have 30 mil in cap space. And look, Ryan Tannehill is a deck. I mean, he's got his contract is, it's short. It's massive.
Loaded is a word for it.
Yeah, maybe. So there's not a lot of teams out there that could acquire that, right? They're going to absolve that. It's just not going to be the case. But let's say you draft one of these quarterbacks in the later rounds, and then you have a Ryan Tannehill. That's not a bad option. So that's what you're probably going to see, right? It's not necessarily a huge splash. Maybe in the wide receiver free agent market, right? The Raiders, I know they're near and dear to my heart, but Derek Carr has been a topic of conversation with Josh McDaniels. We stole him from you. Thank you very much, Koff. Is Derek Carr going to be there? Or if he isn't, where could he be? If the Raiders get an offensive lineman in the draft, please and thank you. And if they acquire a wide receiver, let's say DK Metcalf. Let's say Seattle blows up that entire team and DK Metcalf is available. Like, could he be something on the Raiders? Could Devontae Adams be something on the Raiders? That's what you want to potentially take a look at, the edge defenders, as opposed to the quarterbacks. I know it's quarterback league, but we might not see a lot of moves this year.
Talking about Tampa, because it's going to be an exhausting story. I never truly read. I never would have envisioned that, regardless of whether he is done or isn't done, that this is how it would sort of maybe end with Tom Brady, right? Like I figured like 20 plus years of dominance and all the Super Bowl appearances, all the Super Bowl wins, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He is, just to show some respect to the people that disagree, even though I think you're insane, I will say he is arguably the greatest quarterback of all time.
There's no arguing. He is.
He's bumbling retirement here, man. Like first the reports, from ESPN about whether he would, and then everybody rushing out to the denial that he's not. And then a couple days, and then he says on his podcast, I got to think about it. And then like the next morning issues the statement saying goodbye. And then it's a goodbye to Tampa and leaves out the Patriots, and people make a big deal out of that, mostly around New England, obviously. And now at every turn, and he's showing up at golf tournaments. He's got his podcast. He's, wherever he is, at every turn, the guy is asked if he's going to retire, if he's definitely done playing, and he insists upon leaving the door open, which to me, by the way, is making a couple of things abundantly clear. One, he was just done with Tampa, whether he's done playing or not. He was definitely done with Tampa. And second of that, it makes the whole goodbye to Instagram farewell to Tampa look a lot more like a farewell to Tampa and not the NFL, because he really might come back. And then you have Bruce Arians at the combine. Would you trade him? And he says, no, it's bad for business, as if he's actually the general manager and has a choice in this situation. Like they're not going to do Tom Brady a solid if he forced their hand. But I just think I could ramble on like I've been doing. I think the whole thing is for lack of a better way of putting it, annoyingly fascinating that Tom Brady, of all people, is out there, pulling an Aaron Rodgers, pulling a Brett Favre right now.
Yeah. And what do we know about Tom Brady, Koff? Is that 99? Well, he's great. He is the greatest of all time, the quarterback position, right? That's undisputed. Yep. Like people who try to dispute that are clowns. You can't. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but some opinions are dead wrong.
Moose, is Ulrich listening?
Yeah, exactly. Well, don't go me started on Moose's idea of what a good football player is. But no, just kidding. But what do we know about Tom Brady other than that, right? Is that 99.9% of his moves are deliberate. Everything that the man does is thought through. And now the 0.01 is the timing of the retire, like how it came out, right? That's probably something that wasn't planned. But Florio on the 21st of February mentioned that he thinks that they're going to San Francisco. And if you take a look at the odds, Koff, of their to win the Super Bowls, the 49ers, right? Last year was plus 1,400 preseason. This year, it's the same. It's the same at plus 1,400 for the 49ers to win. And now look, it's at plus 1,300. So it's dropped down from plus 14 to plus 13. So what are you seeing, right? Like he thinks that Brady's going to play with the 49ers. What do we always see with these guys later in their careers? Right. And even Stafford, right? The GM for the Lions for, 10, whatever it is, became like there was a connection that he had with LA. And you just see these players towards the end, especially a guy of Brady's caliber, which he's in the, like an echelon of his own, dictate his future. And boy, like he deserves it. If there is a single person, an athlete that deserves to dictate their own future, it's Tom Brady, and he will. So the fact that he's leaving it open is good for business. It's good for all of his other stuff that he's doing, whether he's starring in a movie about essentially himself or fans that are going to watch him, right? If he's doing all of his crypto stuff and his NFT stuff, his workout regime, he wants to be the Jordan brand for football. Yep. If he stays relevant, it's just good for business. So why would you say I'm done? Why would you say I'm done? Because then everything else predicates off of that. So why not leave it open?
So is that you though? And just you, this is Sweet Tea's opinion here. Is this you saying that you do think he is done? He's just, this is all business motivated?
I think he's more done than we think, right? Like if everyone's like, oh, he's 50-50 or he's coming back 30, I'm 30% convinced that he's retired and 70% is coming back. I think it's more than we think. Now, whatever that number is, right? Who knows? But I think people Like, this guy has been playing for so long. I don't think he has more to prove. And think about what he can do past football. Look at what Jordan's done past football, right? Like, that's what you got to think about. Stay away from the football stuff and galaxy brain this and be a lot wider in your purview and look at what he can do being healthy, both physically and mentally, from a business standpoint, right? He's got so many business ventures that takes a lot of time, and he's competitive. And if he finds that competitive edge, the same way he was at the quarterback position for 2 decades in the business world, he's not coming back. He's not coming back because it doesn't make any sense. To me, at least, it doesn't make any sense. What more does he have to prove? What, he's going to win a Super Bowl for San Francisco and come on home, a la LeBron James? No, Brady doesn't need that stuff.
Doesn't need it. It'd be a hell of a story, but I agree with you. He doesn't need it.
I would love it. You would love it.
Yeah,
well, even the Patriots fans would love it.
So we'll go in just a sec here, but just because we're talking about Tampa and just the arrogance that is Bruce Arians too, who I haven't even been convinced that he's coming back, given that I just think that, like, looking at the odds right now. So the Bucs are 28-1. They're plus 2,800, right, which is middle of the pack to win a Super Bowl next year. You won't have Brady. I firmly believe that. Whether he plays somewhere or not, you won't have Brady. You just had a Pro Bowl lineman retire. Right. Godwin, don't be surprised if he's gone. Gronkowski, if he stays in the NFL. There are all these reports about Buffalo now and him going home at the end of his career. He's from Western New York. I think the Bucs are going to be terrible next year. It's like 28-1 to me is still amazing. Like, put them in the 50-1 with, like, the Steelers, your Raiders, no offense, the Dolphins, the Commanders, the Falcons, the Panthers, the Bears, put them there.
Offense taken, but no, you're right. Right. Like, that's just grasping at straws right now. That's the whole idea. That is the news of Brady potentially coming back to the Bucs, right? And people thinking that that's a value, but I'd stay away. There's much better, more valued teams that I think would be like Seattle, like the New Orleans, right? Sure. The Raiders, if they get someone. So yeah, that's like, if I wanted to go deep in the odds, like the a la Cincinnati Bengals last year for this year, those are the teams that I'm looking at, not the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
All right. Thanks to Eamon, our producer, undercover boss Tom, T. Pike, our technical director, and his fiance for tuning in. Oh. Very loyal follower of this show, we've come to learn. Wow. And of course, Meiselman joining us earlier. Reed hopping on as he does every Thursday. I'm Adam Kaufman. You got the Sweat tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. Eastern, across all the DraftKings channels, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, and the Slate will be with you again. LaMarca and Glash will have some NBA conversation for you right around the same time tomorrow after the 4:00 sim, right around 5:00 Eastern. So you got another Madden sim on the way in just a couple of minutes on the DraftKings YouTube page, and a few more in general over the course of this evening as well. Reed, always a pleasure, my man.
All right, bud. And on top of that, do we like Chicago at -1.5?
Sure. What the heck?
Stay tuned. Post sports show. We'll tell you then. No, I'm just kidding. It's always good to see you, bud.
See ya.